This family's 4th of July vacation got off to a bit of a rocky start. I'm Aiden Mattis, and welcome back to the Lore Lodge. On July 4th, 1938, the Beilhartz family was on vacation in Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. They were spending this time hiking, fishing, camping, just overall having a good time because the Beilhartz family had 10 children, so the total of 12 family members meant that basically any excursion was going to be a larger affair and event. The family had chosen to set up their campsite near Roaring River in a fairly isolated area of the national park. Now, no weather data for this year actually exists as far as I can tell, so I had to figure out how this situation would have looked for them in 1938 using today's numbers. Now, the Estes Park area of Rocky Mountain National Park gets up to a maximum of 101 degrees in July and a minimum of 53 degrees in July. Taking into account the fact that the Earth has gotten slightly warmer since 1938, we can probably say with confidence that we were looking at least 90 degrees at the peak heat of the day. This area of the park, being in the Rockies, does have a number of peaks, cliff faces, steeper mountains, so it's a pretty treacherous area, but if you're hiking with a large group, with family, and everybody's paying attention, there's no real reason that somebody should find themselves unable to get down or even find their way up most of these peaks, especially not 4-year-old Alfred Beilhartz. Considering the temperatures, Alfred probably would have been wearing lighter clothes, and it's said that he was wearing a bandage, though I couldn't actually figure out where the bandage was on his body. Probably, I would guess, his arm or his leg. Getting up from their specific campsite and going on a quick hike over to Estes Park, the family lined up, quite literally, so that the adults were in the front and then the children were working their way back. Now, based on what happened, it seems like maybe the adults should have been on both sides of the line, as they have been in every instance in my life where anything like this has happened. But for whatever reason, the Beilhartz parents decided that they were both going to walk at the front of the line and trust their kids to look after one another. So, they set off, and somewhere during the journey from their campsite to Estes Park, Alfred vanished. The family quickly launched a preliminary search, assuming that he had just wandered off, but the remaining 11 members of the family could not find him. So, they went and spoke to forest rangers, who immediately launched a search for Alfred. The assumption that the investigators took was that Alfred had managed to find his way down into a nearby creek and drowned. Why they immediately went to Alfred being dead at the bottom of a creek is something I will never understand, but national park's gonna national park. After a few days, bloodhounds were brought in because nobody could find Alfred and there was no sign of his body. They had dammed the creek, they had drudged the creek, they figured he was there, but they couldn't find any sign of him, none of his belongings, nor none of his remains. So, they decided instead they were going to widen the search. The first set of bloodhounds found his scent and immediately bolted up rather than down. Now, the place that they went was a very, very steep hill as part of one of these mountains, that they went about 500 feet up in a way that there's absolutely no way that a 4-year-old could have made this climb. Not only because it was very steep and rocky, but also because it simply would not have been possible for a 4-year-old to have the upper body strength to climb 500 feet up a cliff face. But the dogs did lead investigators up that 500-foot hike, and then, upon reaching this plateau, simply laid down as if Alfred was right there, as if they had completed their job. There was no trail, Alfred didn't seem to have moved, and they didn't sniff further up the mountain. So, whatever happened with Alfred after he reached that spot, if he did, the dogs didn't seem to have any idea what it would be. So, realizing that this was completely ridiculous, there's no way Alfred ever was there, they figured, you know what, the dogs screwed up, we're going to bring in a second team of dogs, and they're going to search. But that second dog team went to the exact same place. So, baffled by this, investigators really had nothing else to go off of and asked people to simply keep a lookout. Now, they had ignored one possible sighting of Alfred, because only 24 hours into the search and 6 miles away from where the dogs eventually led the investigators, another man had claimed to have seen something. This man, whose identity has never actually been verified, was hiking on a trail near Mount Chapin. He recalled that he had heard some rustling, looked up, and about 500 feet up, in an elevation called the Devil's Nest, he had seen a child peering down at him. And then, suddenly, The child screamed and was pulled backwards, and that was the last he saw. He reported it, and because it was so far away and only 24 hours into the search, nobody really believed that it was possible Alfred even got over there. On top of that, he was 500 feet in the air. So how could that possibly have happened? They just figured, no, it's not possible, there's no way. So the only thing that was said was, we'll keep a lookout and we'll try and see. We'll keep the case open. They didn't assume he was dead, and Alfred's parents fully believed that Alfred was still alive and had been kidnapped. About a year later, somebody cited Alfred in Nebraska walking with a man, but it couldn't be confirmed, and there was not enough detail to actually determine who the man he would have been with was, so that lead went cold. As well, there was that wasn't a year after. Sometime after Alfred's disappearance, a child who matched his description was seen walking with a man in Nebraska, but nobody could identify who the man was, and so that lead ran cold. The only other lead that came after Alfred's disappearance was when a ransom note was delivered to the house, which demanded $500 for the safe return of Alfred, saying that the child would not take to them, and if the money was given to them, then they would deliver him within 24 hours. The letter said that they had gone out west. Now, keep in mind, the family was from Denver, so that means basically that they were in California. The federal government did investigate, but they just determined that it was a cruel hoax in their opinion and did not follow it any further. Now, it would have been very easy for them to leave the $500 in a can as requested and simply stake it out and see what happened. Whether or not these people actually did have Alfred, if they were to do that, and all they had to do was leave a can with $500 in it, which at today's time would be about $10,000, all they had to do was leave that can there and watch it to see if anything came of it. If there were kidnappers, they could probably have found Alfred. If there weren't kidnappers, they at least could have caught the people who were trying to profit off of this family's trauma. So the fact that the feds didn't investigate at all, or even the local police didn't go through with this, because let's be realistic, I'm pretty sure their community could have pulled together $500 to get this child back, regardless of whether it was going to lead to the child returning or to it being discovered that someone was just playing a cruel prank. In either case, that's better than what they did, which was nothing at all. And finally, it didn't involve a sighting or a promise of delivery, but in an abandoned cabin in Rocky Mountain National Park, they did find a bandage, and the bandage was tested. At the time, since we don't have DNA testing yet, I'm assuming that the test was that they let bloodhounds sniff it or tried to link it to Alfred in some way, but it couldn't be confirmed that it was his, and even so, there was no lead regarding the abandoned cabin other than that there was a bandage there. So, once again, the case went cold. Fast forward to 2022, 84 years later, and Alfred is still missing, and almost certainly, simply due to the time period, even if he was alive, it's very unlikely that he would have reached 88 years old living out in the wilderness. So, Alfred is likely dead today and was never found. The case will never be solved. This does fit with a number of the missing 411 cases that we've picked out as having a higher likelihood of supernatural involvement. Now, this is for a few reasons. A, it fits almost every single profile point of this, what we've kind of dubbed the flesh pedestrian, whatever this creature is that it is theorized inhabits the North American continent and is responsible for some of these missing 411 cases, because we're talking cave systems, mountains, national park, sketchy vibes from the feds, and a few other things like the river and the fact that he disappeared ostensibly from what would have been a line where he could have been seen. I mean, we're assuming that nobody put a 4-year-old alone at the back of the line. So how is it that Alfred disappeared and nobody saw it, and the feds put so little effort into looking for him? The search effort, while involving 150 people and dogs and all of that, only lasted 10 days and didn't follow up on what may have been the only concrete lead just a day into the search. It almost seems like they weren't really looking for him, or like they didn't want to find him, because it might uncover something strange. On top of that, like I said, there's the fact that the other lead for where he might have been was 500 feet up a hill, a mountain really, in a little enclave on a little plateau, and the last sighting of him was him being dragged away from the cliff while screaming. So, Clearly, in order for him to have even gotten up there, and remember, the bloodhounds twice did lead investigators 500 feet up a mountain to a spot that he could not have gotten to on his own. That means that he must have been carried up there, either by a kidnapper, a person, or by something else. Now, had he been carried up that way by a mountain lion or some other predator, there likely would have been blood spots, signs of a struggle, but there wasn't anything. So that kind of rules out natural predation, which means that either somebody carried him up and captured him, like either waited for him to wander off, which means that somebody was stalking this family, or managed to sneak up on him, grab him, and get him 500 feet up a mountain without him screaming. So, really, no matter what the case here, the only feasible natural explanation is that a human being convinced him to wander off the trail without his family noticing, and then once he got behind a tree or something, grabbed him, put a hand over his mouth, and then maybe knocked him out and carried him up. That's the only thing I can really think of here. And it's even then, it's still flimsy. But like I always say, we try and look for a rational explanation before we immediately say something is supernatural. So, what's the possibility here? He was kidnapped by the most adept kidnapper to ever exist and never seen again. Or something that the government does not want us to know about took him. But, we can always trust the government, right? Anyway, let us know your thoughts. We're very curious about what other people think of this case, considering how strange it is. We do try and lay out all of the available facts before we jump to any conclusion, and the reason that we put our conclusions about what may have happened at the end of the video, rather than at the beginning of the video and trying to persuade you, is so that you can come to your own conclusions and then see if you agree with us. So let us know what your thoughts were in the comments. If you like this video, even if you didn't like this video, smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, that way you can hate on us more consistently, and, of course, the notification bell will let you know every time we post. But we post every Friday, now at about 5 p.m., because that seems to be when the most of you are active, and we've been posting a lot more on our Patreon, which is patreon.com/thelorelodge, and over there, that's where it really helps us to do things. We just went up to New York to film a actual on-site documentary about the Thomas Messick disappearance, and that was funded by you guys, our patrons. So, if you want to help us do more cool stuff like that, and really get out into the world and make some more in-depth content, throw us $1 a month. It'll really help us do things, and it kind of makes us feel nice. It makes us feel valued, It's nice, and sometimes we get to buy pretty things. And of course, Aiden's saving for his BBL, so you gotta help him out. But anyway, I'm Aiden Mattis. Aiden Thornbury is taking a nap on the couch, and thanks for stopping by the Lore Lodge.
I love that the BBL has become a thing.
Right? See, I said it like as a joke the first time, and I think it just is kind of worked. It just works.